I never thought that saying no to my own child could end with buttercream in my hair and strangers whispering behind their wine glasses. You selfish old woman. That house is already mine. Dad left it to me, not you, and you're too stubborn to admit it. Briana's scream tore through the room like a siren, freezing every guest mid-bite. The cake hit me square in the face before I could even process her words. Chocolate frosting smeared across my cheek. The heavy layers slid down, collapsing into my lap. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just sat there, motionless, as sugary sweetness clung to my blouse and humiliation clung to my soul. It wasn't the cake that hurt. It wasn't even her words. It was the realization, the crushing, suffocating knowing that I had raised someone capable of this. The guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their eyes darting between me and Briana. Some of them looked horrified. Others, smug, like they had always suspected something ugly lived under our perfect family veneer. I wiped a thick glob of frosting from my jaw with trembling fingers. My napkin tore in my grip, useless against the sticky mess. "Fine," I said softly, my voice carrying over the silence in the room like a blade slicing through butter. "You'll get what you deserve," Briana smirked. That cold, entitled little smirk. She thought she'd won. She thought I was weak. She thought this house, this life, was already hers. And in that moment, as I looked into my daughter's gleaming, victorious eyes, I realized something with terrifying clarity. I wasn't going to let her take one more piece of me. Not my dignity, not my home, not another damn thing. I didn't even bother cleaning the frosting off my hair when I got home. The cake had hardened on my blouse by the time I sat alone at the kitchen table. The house, my house, felt different now. It wasn't the warm, safe place I'd built over decades. It felt tainted. She really believes it's hers, I whispered to myself. I could still hear Briana's voice in my head, sharp and entitled. That house is already mine. Dad left it to me. My hands curled into fists. This wasn't the first time she'd said something like that, but it was the first time she said it in public. Loud, shameless, like she wanted everyone to know she'd won. I thought about the woman Briana had become. Not the little girl with pigtails and scraped knees who used to beg me to bake her favorite chocolate chip cookies. No, that version of her was long gone. The Briana standing in my dining room today was cold, calculating. "You're lucky I even bother with you anymore, Mom," she'd snapped last month when I refused to co-sign another loan for her new business idea. She wasn't asking anymore. She was demanding, and for years, I'd let her. I bailed her out when she racked up credit card debt in her 20s. I helped her and her husband when they wanted a down payment on a house they couldn't afford. Every time she called crying, I picked up, even when I knew she only wanted money. I thought I was building her a future, I said under my breath, but all I did was teach her to see me as a wallet with a heartbeat. A text buzzed on my phone. It was from Briana. "We need to talk about the house. You're not thinking clearly. Call me." I put the phone face down. Not thinking clearly? That's what she always said when I didn't do what she wanted. The truth was, for the first time in my life, I was thinking clearly. I glanced around the kitchen, the cabinets I painted myself 20 years ago, the oak table Harold and I saved for months to buy, the windows I'd washed 1,000 times over. She wanted all of this, and I could feel it in my gut. She wouldn't stop until she got it. The next morning, I woke to find Briana's car in my driveway. She was pacing, phone pressed to her ear. When I opened the door, she launched into me before I could speak. "Mom, this is ridiculous. Everyone knows that house is coming to me. Dad would have wanted it that way. You're too old to keep up with it." I just stared at her. "Do you even hear yourself?" I said finally. "You're talking like I'm already gone." She rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. I'm trying to help you. You could move into something smaller, maybe a condo. It's time to let go." Let go. She said it like she was doing me a favor. "Briana," I said quietly, "if you want this house so badly, you'll have to wait until I'm dead. Or," she said with a cruel little smirk, "you could just sign it over now and save us all the trouble." And in that moment, I saw her clearly, not as my daughter, but as a stranger who had spent years sharpening her smile into a weapon. "You really think I'm weak, don't you?" I said. Briana crossed her arms. "I think you're tired. And I think you know deep down I deserve this house after everything I've put up with." "Put up with?" I nearly laughed. She turned to leave. "Think about it, Mom. You're not getting any younger." I made myself a promise. If Briana loved this house so much, I'd make sure it was the one thing she could never have. What happened later that night shocked me even more. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but when you hear your daughter's voice through the wall, whispering like she's plotting something, you don't walk away. I had gone to bed early, hoping sleep would drown out the memory of cake sliding down my face. The house still smelled faintly of frosting and humiliation. But around midnight, I woke to the sound of Briana's voice drifting down the hall. She was in the guest room on the phone. "Don't worry," she whispered. "I'll get her to sign the house over next week. She's too frail to fight me." I froze. "She's practically begging for someone to take care of her," Briana said. "I'll play nice for a few days, act like I care, then, bam, the deed's in my name, and we're set." I pressed a hand over my mouth, gripping the door frame to keep from collapsing. My own daughter, the one I'd carried for 9 months, stayed up with during fevers, cried over at her high school graduation, was talking about me like I was a senile old woman she could con out of her home. "Yeah," she continued, her tone sharper now. "Mom doesn't even know what she's signing half the time. She's so out of it these days. It'll be easy." Every word stabbed like a knife. I wasn't frail. I wasn't out of it. I had spent my entire life holding this family together, and now she was treating me like an obstacle to bulldoze. "Once it's in my name," Briana said, "we can renovate, flip it if we want. Honestly, we deserve this. After all I've put up with from her, it's the least she can do." "Put up with me?" I backed away from the door, my heart pounding so loud I was afraid she'd hear it. The next morning, Briana came into the kitchen, all sweetness and light, like the previous night's phone call had never happened. "Good morning, Mom," she said brightly. "Did you sleep okay?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. She poured herself coffee, humming some pop song under her breath. "I was thinking maybe we could go see a lawyer together this week. You know, just to get your affairs in order. It's the responsible thing to do." Responsible. That word tasted like poison now. I forced a smile, the kind you give a stranger you don't trust. "That's a good idea, Briana. We'll talk about it later." Her face lit up. "See? I knew you'd come around." She left soon after, heading to some appointment she refused to explain. As soon as the door closed, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wood grain. 15 years of helping her through every crisis, paying off her debts, bailing her husband out of his failed ventures, co-signing loans I knew they'd never repay. I thought I was giving her a safety net, but all I'd really given her was the belief that I was disposable. That's when it hit me. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was fury. Pure, quiet fury. I wouldn't cry over her schemes. I wouldn't beg her to love me. And I sure as hell wouldn't let her take the house I built with my own hands. "She's going to regret believing I was too frail to fight," I whispered. Because I wasn't frail. I was just getting started. The next evening, I parked down the street from Briana's house. I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't even supposed to know where she and her husband were having dinner. But after hearing her scheme over the phone, I needed to see for myself. Their dining room curtains were open just enough to see Briana and Marcus sitting across from each other, wine glasses in hand. I should have driven away, but instead, I cracked my window, letting in the cool night air, and listened. "Relax," Briana said, swirling her wine like she owned the world. "It's already as good as done." Marcus frowned. "You sure? Your mom doesn't seem like the type to give up her house." "She's too old and tired to fight me," Briana replied, her tone dripping with arrogance. "Besides, I've put up with her for years. I deserve that house. I've earned it." "Earned it?" I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. Marcus chuckled. "So what's the plan? She just signs it over and we sell?" "That's the idea," Briana said. "We'll cash out, finally get the life we deserve. No more scraping by." "And if she protests," Briana smirked, and took a long sip of wine. I'll just remind her how much she owes me. Guilt always works. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. They weren't just planning to take the house. They were planning to erase me from it, like I was some obstacle in their perfect little dream life. I thought about all the times Briana had cried to me over the years. Mom, I'm drowning in debt. Mom, we're going to lose the house. Mom, you're all I have. Every single time, I had come running, but standing in the dark, listening to her talk about me like I was a burden to be managed, something in me hardened. This wasn't the daughter I raised. This was a stranger wearing her face. I drove home on autopilot, staring at the road but not really seeing it. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd made a decision. If Briana loved this house so much, I'd make sure it was the one thing she could never have. I walked through every room, touching the walls, running my fingers over the banister Harold built with his own hands, staring at the scuffs in the floor from years of birthday parties and Christmas mornings. Briana thought I was too frail to fight, but she was wrong. I wasn't weak. I wasn't done. And first thing tomorrow, I was going to call my lawyer. The next morning, I stared at my phone for a long time before dialing. Margaret Chin's number was still saved under attorney emergency only. I'd never imagined I'd use it against my own child. When she answered, her voice was calm and professional. Helen, it's been years. What's going on? I swallowed hard. Margaret, I need to rewrite my will, and I need to make sure my daughter doesn't get a single brick of this house. There was a pause on the other end. I see, she said gently. Why don't you come in this afternoon? We can talk privately. Privately is key, I said. No one can know. Not Briana, not her husband, especially not her. You have my word, Margaret replied. I've seen situations like this before, but I doubted she'd ever seen this. That afternoon, I sat in Margaret's office as sunlight streamed through the blinds. She listened without interrupting as I told her everything. The cake in my face, the phone call I'd overheard, Briana boasting to Marcus about cashing out on the house. Margaret's expression didn't change, but I caught the tightness in her jaw. She's under the impression you're too frail to resist, she said finally. That's her mistake, I replied. Margaret nodded. We can create an airtight trust. The house will be legally protected, and we can direct it anywhere you want. Charity, perhaps? Yes, I said without hesitation. If she loves this house so much, let her watch strangers live in it. I want it to go to a women's shelter. Margaret scribbled notes, her pen moving fast. And what about your other assets? Savings? Investments? I'll decide later, I said. Right now, I just need to know she'll never get the house. Margaret's eyes softened. You're stronger than you realize, Helen. No, I said quietly. I'm just tired of being their fool. By the time I left her office, the documents were already in motion. Walking to my car, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. Not the kind that comes from writing checks or fixing other people's mistakes. The kind that comes from drawing a line in the sand and daring anyone to cross it. That night, Briana called. Mom, she said sweetly, I was thinking we could have lunch tomorrow. Just us girls, to talk about the house. She thought I didn't see through her. That sounds lovely, I replied, keeping my voice light. Oh, good. I'm so glad you're finally seeing reason. As soon as she hung up, I stared at the phone in my hand. Briana thought she had me cornered, but what she didn't know was that I'd already started building the walls around her. I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me in the mirror. Her hair was limp, her cardigan sagged off her shoulders, and her eyes, once sharp and steady, looked glassy, unfocused, perfect. That was exactly how Briana needed to see me. If she believed I was frail, confused, and ready to give up, then she'd lean in closer, and that's when I'd strike. At lunch the next day, Briana swept into the cafe with her designer bag swinging and her sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. Mom, she said, her tone dripping with fake concern. You look tired. Are you getting enough sleep? I blinked slowly, like I hadn't quite processed her words. Oh, yes, dear. Just a little foggy these days. She smiled, a smile so tight and sharp it felt like a knife pressed to my skin. That's understandable at your age, she said lightly. But don't worry, I'll help you get things in order before it all gets too overwhelming. I fiddled with the edge of my napkin, letting my hands tremble just enough for her to notice. Thank you, Briana, I murmured. You've always been such a good girl. Her smile widened, and I saw it, the flash of triumph in her eyes. She thought she'd already won. 2 days later, she arrived at my house with a folder of papers. Mom, we need to take care of this while you're still able, she said sweetly, patting my hand like I was a child. She spread the documents across the kitchen table. Transfer forms, power of attorney agreements, a draft deed placing the house in her name. It's all very standard, she cooed. You sign here, and I take care of everything. No more stress for you. I squinted at the papers, letting my breath come shallow and uneven. Briana, I don't understand all this legal talk, I said softly. It's so complicated. Her husband, Marcus, stepped forward, his expression smug. Don't worry, Helen. Briana and I will handle it. Just sign where she shows you. I looked between them, feigning confusion. Will I still be able to live here? I asked. Briana placed a hand on her chest like she was offended. Of course, Mom. You'll always have a place here, as long as you don't make things difficult. Later, I overheard her talking to Marcus in the living room. She's so far gone, Briana whispered. She won't even realize she's signing her life away. Marcus chuckled. It's almost too easy. I pressed my back to the hallway wall, my nails digging into my palms. They thought I was feeble. They thought I didn't understand. But in reality, every word, every glance, every smug little laugh was just more fuel for the fire I was building. The next morning, I called Margaret from the privacy of my locked bedroom. It's time, I said. I'm ready to finalize the trust. Her voice was steady, reassuring. I'll have everything prepared by the end of the week. We'll make sure your daughter never sees a cent from that house. Good, I said, staring out the window at the garden I'd planted decades ago. She wants me to play the fool. I'll be the best fool she's ever seen. 2 days later, Briana brought the papers again, this time with a pen already uncapped. Here, Mom, she said sweetly. This is the last step. Once you sign, you can relax. No more worrying about bills or paperwork. I took the pen with a shaky hand, hovering over the line. Where do I sign again? I asked, my voice quivering. Briana grinned, leaning in close to point at the signature line. Right here, Mom. Just make your mark and let us handle the rest. I nodded slowly, then set the pen down. Maybe tomorrow, I said, my tone weak. My hand is cramping today. You know how it is at my age. Her smile faltered for a split second before snapping back into place. Of course, Mom, she said, forcing cheer into her voice. Take all the time you need. But I could see it, the impatience in her eyes, the way her fingers drummed on the table. She wanted me to sign. She needed me to sign. And the longer I delayed, the more reckless she would become. Two can play this game. If Briana wanted to believe I was a weak old woman, too frail to understand what I was signing, then I'd make sure she believed it completely. The higher she climbed on her ladder of arrogance, the harder she'd fall when I kicked it out from under her. That afternoon, I called Briana. Sweetheart, I said in my best trembling voice, you were right. It's time to transfer the house. It's all too much for me. There was a pause on her end, just long enough to hear her sharp intake of breath. Oh, Mom, she said finally, her voice dripping with false concern. I'm so relieved you've come around. I'll set up a meeting with our lawyer. We can make it official. Good, I murmured. Just one thing. Yes? Could you come here for the meeting? I'd like to spend one last night in the house before I sign it over. You know, to say goodbye. Another pause. I could almost hear her grin through the phone. Of course, Mom. That's very sentimental of you. We'll come tomorrow afternoon, and then you can have the evening to yourself. You've earned that. Her tone was sugary sweet, but I caught the hunger underneath. She thought she'd already won. She really believed it. She thought this was her victory lap, her moment to take everything I built. But what she didn't know was that I'd already signed the house over to the Women's Shelter Trust. Legally, she couldn't take a single brick, even if she burned this place to the ground. The house was silent that night, Not the kind of peaceful silence you get after a long day. This was heavier, thicker, like the air itself was holding its breath. I walked from room to room, trailing my fingers along the walls. The wallpaper Harold and I put up one spring afternoon. The hardwood floors I'd polished so many times I could see my reflection in them. The chipped banister Briana used to slide down as a child. This house wasn't just wood and brick. It was decades of my life. And tonight, I was saying goodbye to it. I thought I'd feel sorrow, but instead, I felt calm. This house no longer belonged to me, not in the way Briana believed anyway. Earlier that day, in Margaret's quiet office, I'd signed the papers transferring ownership into the Women's Shelter Trust. If anything happens to me, I told Margaret, promise me Briana will never get her hands on this place. You have my word, she said firmly. It's airtight. They could scream in the middle of City Hall and it wouldn't change a thing. For the first time in months, I believed her. Now, standing in the living room, I stared at the photo of Harold on the mantel. She thinks I'm weak, I whispered. She thinks I'm too tired, too confused to fight. But Harold had always told me, Helen, your strength isn't loud. It's quiet, steady, unstoppable when it matters. Tomorrow, I'd prove him right. My phone buzzed, jolting me out of my thoughts. A text from Briana. Don't be nervous. Tomorrow will be simple. Just sign and let us take care of you. I stared at her words for a long time. She really believed it. She thought she'd cornered me, that I was hours away from handing her everything. She had no idea she was walking straight into her own undoing. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about all the ways I'd failed her as a mother, how I'd smoothed her path so many times, taught her to see love as endless forgiveness instead of boundaries. Maybe this was my fault, but tomorrow I'd make sure it ended. By morning, I was ready. I dressed carefully, choosing the same pale blue blouse I'd worn to Harold's funeral. It felt fitting somehow, a quiet goodbye. But this time I wasn't mourning a man. I was mourning the illusion that Briana and I were still family. The morning light spilled through the kitchen window, soft and golden, but it felt like the calm before a hurricane. I sat at the old oak table, hands folded neatly in front of me, listening to the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. They were here. The predators had come to collect their kill. Briana was the first through the door, wearing a silk blouse and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mom, she said brightly, her voice full of false warmth. Are you ready to do the right thing today? Behind her, Marcus trailed in carrying a leather briefcase, and their lawyer, a man with slicked back hair and a tailored suit, brought up the rear. Let's get this over with, Briana said, dropping her bag on the counter, so you can enjoy your golden years in peace. The way she said it, with that mocking little lilt in her voice, made my stomach turn, but I didn't flinch. I just smiled softly, the same way I used to smile at her when she was a child throwing tantrums. Yes, dear, I murmured. Let's get this over with. They moved quickly, spreading papers across the table. The lawyer spoke first. It's a straightforward transfer of title. Your daughter and her husband have agreed to cover all expenses and ensure you have accommodations for the future. Accommodations. As if I were some stray animal they were shoving into a shelter. Marcus leaned against the counter, arms folded, his eyes scanning the house like he was already choosing which walls to knock down first. This place has good bones, he muttered under his breath. A few updates and it'll sell for double. Briana shot him a look but didn't correct him. I heard every word. Mom, Briana said sweetly, sliding the papers and an uncapped pen toward me. This is the right thing to do. For you, for us, for everyone. Don't overthink it. I stared at her, at the daughter I'd given everything to, the daughter who now sat across from me, treating me like a problem to be solved. You're doing the right thing, Helen, the lawyer added smoothly. It's time to make things easier on yourself. For a moment, I let my hand hover over the pen. I even let it tremble, just slightly, the way they expected it to. Briana reached across and patted my hand. Don't worry, she said softly, her eyes gleaming with victory. You won't regret this. If only she knew. I set the pen down gently. Before I sign, I said in my weakest voice, There's something I need to say." Briana's smile faltered for half a second. "Mom, let's not make this dramatic," she said. "We've all got things to do." "I won't take long," I replied. I rose slowly from my chair, smoothing my skirt, and walked to the window. Outside, the garden Harold and I planted decades ago was in full bloom. Roses, tulips, sunflowers, standing tall and defiant in the summer air. When I turned back, I saw them watching me like vultures circling a dying animal, and in that moment, the weight in my chest lifted. This wasn't sadness anymore. It wasn't fear. It was power. Pure, quiet power. The pen sat in front of me like a loaded gun. Briana's eyes locked on mine, her smile tight and expectant. "Go on, Mom," she urged. "Sign it. You'll finally have peace. We'll all have peace." Marcus shifted impatiently, checking his watch. The lawyer smoothed out the papers with a practiced flick of his wrist. "Mrs. Carter, it really is the simplest solution," he said smoothly. "Once you sign, everything will be settled." I looked down at the documents one last time, and then I pushed them gently back across the table. "Actually," I said calmly, reaching for the folder tucked under my chair, "I brought my own papers." Briana blinked. "What?" Her smile faltered as I slid a crisp stack of documents across the table. The lawyer hesitated, confused. Marcus frowned. But Briana's face, her face went pale as her eyes skimmed the first page. "You wanted this house so badly," I said, my voice steady. "Well, you'll never have it." I leaned in slightly, letting the words cut clean and sharp. "It now belongs to the Women's Shelter Trust. Effective immediately." The silence in the room was deafening. Briana's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You," she stammered, "you can't do this to me." "Oh, but I already did," I replied softly. Marcus snatched up the papers, his face twisting in disbelief. "What the hell is this? Some kind of joke?" The lawyer adjusted his glasses, scanning the documents quickly. His brow furrowed. "This is legally sound," he said quietly. "She's transferred ownership. The house is no longer in her estate." For a moment, the only sound in the room was the faint clink of glass shards settling on the floor. Briana's breathing was ragged, her chest rising and falling like she'd just run a marathon. "You can't do this to me," she screamed, her voice cracking. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably, already gathering his papers, realizing this wasn't the simple transaction he'd expected. Marcus's grip on her arm tightened. Briana calmed down, but she wasn't hearing him, her eyes locked on me, wild and glassy. "You evil witch! You've ruined my life!" She lunged across the table so fast I barely had time to step back. Her fingers curled toward the stack of papers like claws, scattering them to the floor. "This house was supposed to be mine!" she shrieked. Marcus grabbed her around the waist, trying to hold her back. Chairs toppled over. A water pitcher crashed to the floor, spilling across the hardwood. "Briana, stop it!" he barked, but his voice was drowned out by her sobs. I stood still, my hands gripping the edge of the table for balance. "You don't understand," Briana cried. "You can't just give my house away. I've earned it. I've put up with you all these years. Your nagging, your neediness. This is my reward." I looked her straight in the eye, my voice calm but steady. "You've earned nothing," I said. "You don't get rewarded for treating people like stepping stones." Her face twisted, and for a moment, I thought she might strike me. Marcus yanked her back, his voice low and sharp now. "Enough. You're embarrassing yourself." But Briana wasn't done. She wrenched herself free and fell to her knees in front of me, clutching at my skirt like a desperate child. "I'm your daughter," she wailed. "You're supposed to love me unconditionally. You're supposed to take care of me." Her tears smeared her makeup, black streaks running down her cheeks. "I do love you," I said softly. "I've loved you more than I ever loved myself. That's why I lost everything, except my dignity." I gently pulled my skirt free from her grasp. "And now, you'll finally learn what losing feels like too." Briana let out a guttural sob, crumpling to the floor. Her lawyer awkwardly cleared his throat. already edging toward the door. "I think my services are no longer required here," he muttered. Marcus ran a hand down his face, looking 10 years older in that moment. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he said quietly. "Briana, you've gone too far." But she didn't respond. She just sat there, rocking slightly, her hands clenched into fists. I straightened my shoulders and took one last look around the room. "Enjoy your golden years in peace," Briana had said earlier. I almost laughed. This was the first time in decades I actually felt free. Briana was still on the floor when the room fell silent. Her sobs had quieted to shallow, hiccuping breaths, but her hands stayed clenched in tight fists against the hardwood. "Mom," she whispered, her voice hoarse, "please, don't do this to me." I didn't answer. I just stood there, watching her, my daughter, the little girl I once rocked to sleep, reduced to a trembling heap in the house she thought she owned. Marcus shifted uneasily behind her. "Briana," he said softly, "get up. It's over." But she didn't move. Instead, she crawled toward me on her knees, clutching at my skirt like a lifeline. "Please," she begged, her tears soaking the fabric. "I'm your daughter. You're supposed to love me unconditionally. You can't just throw me away like this." For a brief, piercing moment, my heart ached. This was still the child I had held against my chest, the baby whose first word was "Mama." But then I remembered the phone call she made, whispering to her husband about how easy it would be to trick me. "She's too frail to fight me." And my resolve hardened. I bent down slightly, looking her straight in the eye. "I loved you, Briana," I said softly, "more than I loved myself." Her sobs grew louder. "Then why are you doing this?" "Because loving you cost me everything. My savings, my peace, my dignity." My voice didn't waver, even as tears stung my eyes. And I finally realized the only way I'll survive is if I stop letting you take from me. Briana's grip tightened on my skirt. "I can change. I'll be better, I swear. Just don't do this. Don't take it all away from me." "You already took it all away from yourself," I said quietly. I gently pulled my skirt free from her fingers and stepped back. "Briana?" I whispered, my voice breaking. I wanted so badly to be the kind of mother who could forgive anything. But I can't forgive this. Her head dropped to the floor as sobs racked her body. Marcus watched silently, his face pale. He didn't try to stop me. I walked slowly toward the door, each step heavier than the last. My hand paused on the doorknob as I turned to look back one final time. "You wanted everything I built," I said softly. "Now you'll have to build something of your own, or you'll have nothing." And then I stepped outside, closing the door gently behind me. For the first time in years, the air felt light in my lungs. I didn't look back as I walked down the front steps. Behind me, I could still hear Briana's muffled sobs through the walls. For years, I thought being a good mother meant sacrificing everything: my time, my money, my peace. But standing there in the sunlight, I realized something I should have known long ago. Love isn't about letting someone destroy you. At the end of the driveway, I paused. For decades, I thought this house was my greatest gift to her, but it wasn't. The greatest gift I ever gave her was my love, and today, I took it back. I turned one last time, my voice steady, even though no one could hear it. "Maybe I wasn't the perfect mother," I whispered, "but this was the perfect goodbye." Then I walked away and didn't look back, not once. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and check out our other videos.